Hello, boys and girls. So it's the 26th of December, the day after Western Christmas. There's going to be lots of clown world because, the whole reality is just one big clown world, especially in the West these days. Orthodox Christmas, 7th of January on the Western calendar, which is the Gregorian calendar. We based the church bases the calendar off of the Julian calendar. Now there are exceptions. The Greeks they broke their spines and it went off to be part of Europe and switched their calendars. And by the way, there was a schism in the Greek metropolitan polity of Athens after that, where a lot of the priests and the monks said, "No, we're not doing the Catholic calendar," which was the Catholic calendar. Before the schism, the Western Church was unified with the Eastern Church. There was a patriarch in Rome over the Catholic areas. Today, well, there's a lot less of them, and the UK wasn't, I think, part of that territory because the UK didn't go into schism when the Catholics went into schism. Interestingly enough, the UK stayed Orthodox. Harold was an Orthodox Christian. And when William the Bastard, who was given the quest by the Pope to conquer England, and why conquer England? Why do you give a bastard minor lord the right to conquer England? Because he was a Catholic. He had followed the Catholic Church into schism against the unified church. When Harold died at Hastings, when his son died at Hastings, when his brother died at Hastings, when his nephews died at Hastings, Harold's wife and his daughter boarded a ship and they sailed for Kiev, where she married a Russian prince. That was the ending of Harold's line in unity with one of the Russian princes. Now you got to understand, Kievan Rus was a large empire, and there's a reason I'm going to this because that's going to segment into the next part of the first part of our clown world. Harold of Hastings, as an Orthodox Christian, they fled to an Orthodox Christian country, the Kievan Empire, and the Kievan Empire was a loose federation of principalities. And the princes they weren't hereditary in those principalities. They were hereditary only toward the princely seat in Kiev. They were in constant civil war because the princely seat went uncle first, son second. So in other words, I am high prince. I have 2 brothers and 3 sons. When I die, my oldest son doesn't go to the throne. My next brother goes to the throne. And then when he dies, the next brother goes to the throne then. Or if the youngest brother is already dead, then it loops back up to my first son and goes down that line until that line ends and there's nobody to take that line. And so on and so on. So it was a confusing enough concept. And it was in most Slavic lands. And Kievan Rus lasted to the Mongols. The Mongols helped destroy the whole system and then sparked the system of the hereditary involvement. Well, the problem was all these principalities, the leading prince there was only a temporary resident for the most part. There were some princes that were hereditarily on small principalities and didn't want to take part in this whole carousel. That's the best word for it, this whole carousel. But the vast majority, so I would say I'm the oldest son. I now sit down on the throne in Kiev. My brother moves into my previous principality because it was the second best principality because I was the next in line, and so on. The whole thing goes, and everybody moves around, right? So nobody stayed in the bigger principalities. Nobody ever stayed very long in there. So the investment went from the local lesser nobility, because the higher nobility was the druzhina of the prince or the prince's retinue, military retinue. And they moved on with the prince, and so on and so on. So, having said that, There was once a really good channel on YouTube, historical channel called Kings and Generals. And when, an English channel. And then when the SMO started, they started selling their souls out to Zelensky and crowd and the Ukrainian thing. And they were just making all these one-sided videos about the Ukraine war. Well, objectivity, I mean minimal objectivity. But now they've gone and they went into Ukrainian, it's the Ukrainization of Europe and the Ukrainization of the British. And the British, you know, previously anyways, the British were always very competent writing history, even when it made England look not so good. If you had a choice between any Western historical book on any event, you'd usually go with the English because they actually did a better job. Their historians did a better job of showing the reality of it, minus the propaganda. But again, a lot of these groups have Ukrainized, and Kings and Generals no exception. I'm going to call them out because of this last video they did was entire bullshit to such a degree that it's hard to even imagine. About the Kingdom of Ruthenia, the first real Ukrainian kingdom from the 9th century to the 13th century when it was conquered by Poland. You mean the Galician Volhynsky Principality, which is part of Kievan Rus, which is the westernmost part of Kievan Rus. Let's begin with that. And it was part of this whole rotational system as well. So there was no Ukrainians. There is no Ukraine. Ukraine, I mean, means hinterland, right? The Galicians actually were one of the old, at that point, as Russians, they were one of the older Russian kingdoms, or kingdoms, principalities. When the Mongols came through, they were relatively spared because they did have a lot of fortifications. They're in a mountainous area, so they retreated to their fortifications. The problem is Galicia was fought over very often between the Russian princes and the Poles and the Hungarians. Both the Poles and Hungarians and the Moravians before them, and the Moravians were actually a power and weren't part of Poland, larger Poland or larger Hungary. But that was a relatively brief period, like 200 years. They continued to invade Galicia and try to annex it to themselves. Well, as much as this civil war was going on between these various lines of Rurik, which, by the way, in that system, the problem becomes with the uncles and the cousins. I'm the oldest brother. I have a middle brother and have a younger brother. I die, but my middle brother already died. So it jumps to whom? It jumps to my youngest brother. Okay? And after him, it jumps to my son. But the problem is the middle brother, because he never sat the throne in Kiev, his entire lineage is now cut out of this whole system. Well, that usually sat very badly with a lot of people because they feel they just got cheated out by luck or by misgrace and so on. And they would go arm themselves and go try to cut out a chunk for themselves. There are these constant civil wars that eventually devolved after Yaroslav the Wise rule in Kiev. Yaroslav was born in Novgorod. Before him was Vladimir, the Red Sun, was born in Novgorod, who Christianized Russia. So Yaroslav was his son, well, one of his sons. Before that, Igor, who moved down, I'm sorry, was Sviatoslav, who was actually born in Kiev. The only one born out of the first 5 rulers of Rus born in Kiev. Before him was Igor, the son of Rurik, who was born in Novgorod. Before him was Oleg, Rurik's brother, or brother-in-arms, uncle adopted father of Igor after Rurik died, who came down from Novgorod and conquered Kiev. Kiev at that point was ruled by 2 former vassals of Rurik who grabbed it on the way back from raiding Byzantine Empire. Before that, Kiev was the westernmost portion of the Jewish Khazar Empire. It was a vassal state of it, or basically an outpost. And before that was Rurik himself, who was a Dane with a Slavic wife who came over and ruled first in Old Ladega, which was the biggest trade city in northeastern Europe, and then built Novgorod once he figured out that he wasn't going to get run out, like a lot of these types of invited princes would get eventually run out when they'd outstay their welcome. Once he figured out he wasn't going to be outstaying his welcome, he built Novgorod, Novgorod the Great. There's two Novgorods. There's Lower Novgorod, Nizhny Novgorod, and Novgorod the Great, Veliki Novgorod. Anyways, and about 300-year difference in their dates of establishment. So you got this kind of rotation. So it's really started after Yaroslav. So you wind up with four lineages of Rurik who were constantly fighting each other in these civil wars. Well, the things that unified them all and stopped these incessant civil wars was either someone like the Pecheneg or Poltovцы that come over. No, it wasn't Poltovцы. It was the various Mongoloid type tribes that were coming in from western Altai. When they would make big enough incursions, the princes would usually put their civil wars aside if they weren't hiring them as mercenaries against each other. That happened too. And they would unify and destroy them. For example, in their Vladimir Monomach, they crushed a huge encampment, winter encampment of these nomads. And as the nomads said, and they were outnumbered, by the way, by these nomads, like 3-1. But the nomads swore that they saw the angels or the ghost of warriors past, basically Russian warriors past, riding down on them from the skies as the Russian warriors rode down on them on land. As a fact, the Russian princes did a lot of their warfare during winter because the rivers are frozen and you could just run down those rivers just like a highway, right? So you could it made getting around and getting your baggage train, which was on sleighs, around a lot easier. And the nomads weren't very active in the winter. They would shelter down somewhere and build their huge camps. And so they became easy pickings to knock out and drive them back out. And pickings, I mean, getting Russian slaves freed. Because these guys took a lot of slaves and then do the raiding season, take a lot of slaves over winter, and then portion of them would take them down to markets for the Turks or the Persians. That's how the system ran. So the Russian princes would raid these nomadic settlements, temporary settlements, camps, in the middle of winter, crush them, and then they didn't have to worry for a year or two or three before any new groups arrived. But that was a constant issue. In the West, whenever the Poles or the Hungarians invaded and tried to annex Galicia, that's the same time that the Russian princes, again, would unify and drive them out. The problem is after the Mongols, there was nobody to unify. The principalities were crushed, the cities were burnt and being rebuilt. You had the Lithuanian principality that was gobbling up the Russian principalities, and that's also another interesting thing. This was well before the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. The Lithuanian state incorporated a huge amount of Western Rus principalities, to the point where the Lithuanians were only about 10-15% of the population. The rest was all Russians, and most of the nobility was Russian, and the state was Orthodox Christian until the unification with the Poles. And they had a couple civil wars after that because the younger Lithuanian princes didn't want to become be vassals of Poland or in the Polish Commonwealth. Just so there was a lot of infighting after that. And then if we keep going forward, anyways, the Russian princes in Moscow were able to beat out the other Russian princes, like in Rostov, like in Tula, in Tver, and they became the main ones, and they reunified all these Russian princes in the east, and then started conquering Russian land back that was by this point, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, taking it back one chunk at a time. Till eventually got up to Galicia, but that was Galicia was already. You're talking about World War II, because Galicia passed on to Austro-Hungarian Empire eventually, partially to Poland. So Poland, when Poland was partitioned, that area went to, from the Poles went to the Hungarians. Anyways, so they're making up this Ruthenian country with a Galician, with a modern Galician heraldry on it. I mean, you're talking about totally wiping out history, right? You can see on the map right now what I'm talking about, and they're counting all that as Ruthenia. It never has been a Ruthenia. And as far as Ruthenians, or Karpata Rus, better known as Karpata Rus, Carpathian Russians. If you ever known any of these people, I knew quite a few of them from the church I went to when I lived in Raleigh, North Carolina. It was a Greek church, had a lot of Orthodox from all over the world. They consider themselves Russians. Absolutely. Then you want a big red button to push with these guys, you tell them they're not Russians. It'll be a fist fight in a heartbeat. And don't tell them they're some kind of Ukrainians or any other crap. They can't stand that. So there's that. So Kings and Generals, totally sold out. Clown World #1. I mean, talk about just blatant rewriting. I hope whatever money they got from Zelensky and company, or from Steimer and Moron Incorporated, was worth just blowing their credibility totally out of the water. I mean, you can't listen to anything they come up with now, because I mean, when they're that willing to totally rewrite history, I mean, just total bullshit. No, it's hard to even look at them that. But I guess, you've got to historically legalize Ukraine, the hinterland, and the hinterlandians. Because hinterland is Ukraina, hinterland. So, what the Westerns most Westerns don't understand what that word even means. Where have you ever seen a country called hinterland? Never. Anywhere. Because a hinterland is the edge of something. That's why it's a hinter. So, there you go. Anyways, riding right along of the idiot train. And the British, because, no offense to the average Brit, but, the British media. So yesterday was a crash of a embroider aircraft, Canadian aircraft. So this plane was, this is an Azerbaijani plane, was flying to Chechnya, full of Azerbaijanis, Russians, Kazakhs, and there was one other nationality was on there. I don't remember. And by Russians, I'm talking about citizens of Russia, so ethnic Russians, Chechens, others. It was supposed to land in Grozny. Grozny was under threat from American drones, American and British drones via Ukraine, because they attack civilian targets. That's what they do. That's what the Western terrorists do. So Grozny airport was closed. They went to Makalachkala in Dagestan, but that was heavy fog, so they couldn't land there. So they flew across the Caspian Sea to land in Atarau. Western Kazakhstan. Atarai. Anyways, so while they're flying around getting preparing to land, now it was reported it was a flock of birds, but no, it wasn't a flock of birds, because if you look at the tail end of that plane, first of all, there are holes from fragmentary explosion. One. Yes, that could have been from the landing on a gravel area. The gravel just got kicked up. But, and that was my first opinion, and I commented on RT on this yesterday at like midnight. I was on there. But here's the problem. People were taking videos on that flight. So about there was 67 people on that flight, plus 5 crew members, and about 29 people survived, thank God. Not everybody died. When you look at that plane, it's coming in out of control. I mean, and you got a pilot with 15 years experience on there as the captain. And that plane, I mean, it's barreling, right? And it's already on fire. and it's falling apart. And before that, as it was coming around to try to land, and the people are videotaping this from inside, they said, A, they heard a boom outside the plane. B, the plane's wing was damaged. C, the fuselage, part of the fuselage ripped off. That would happen from explosive decompression. So fragments are ripping through the fuselage of the plane. Okay? There's a chance that the cracks will start going through, and under that pressure, part of the fuselage can rip off. It's happened before. It's happened before from micro cracks even. It happened, in fact, to a flight that was coming in from going from Hawaii to California, and it just ripped off the entire top section, and stewardess and a couple other people that weren't seatbelted, they all flew out and bye-bye over the Pacific. I don't know if they ever found their bodies or not. So this is what happened, and people are videotaping it, and one person pulls out, and the oxygen mask fell down. One person pulls out the oxygen mask, and it's got a hole in it, a shrapnel hole in it. Another woman was taking a picture, and it looked like she was already bleeding, like something went through her leg. So, what could do something like that? Well, if it was any major system, it would be obviously, it would, any major anti-aircraft system, obviously it's government owned. It's not just one firing mechanism. There's a radar, there's a control center, there's an entire group of people that have to be involved in this. So and that plane would have been wiped out totally from a hit like that. So we'll ignore that portion. What's left? Manpads are left. Man-portable air defense systems. That's Javelin, Javelin Stingers, for example. They're a prime example. Now, let's remember a couple things that happened here. Let's roll back history just a little bit. America had a lot of Stingers in Afghanistan. America dropped them all as they left. Now, the Taliban grabbed the vast majority of America's stockpiles that America left. And it wasn't by mistake that it was left. The U.S. does this every single time it pulls out of any nation. It drops a lot of weapons, unguarded, so that all these groups will come in there, grab weapons, and then start shooting each other. And then America can feed off of that chaos that they helped create as they were leaving. They did that in Lebanon, they did this in a lot of other places, and they helped refuel the Lebanese Civil War, as a matter of fact, as they left. The problem in Afghanistan for the U.S. is the vast majority of it was grabbed by the Taliban. They came in a lot faster than the U.S. thought they would be able to. But a portion of it went to the ISIL, ISIS, the terrorist organization. It's recognized in Russia, recognized in the U.S. and other places. And they just appeared, this Arabic terrorist organization just appeared in Afghanistan, where there are no Arabs, when it was needed for the U.S. to help fight the Taliban. Go figure on that one. So all these guys, by the way, the ones, they're still fighting. They got a valley, and they're also growing heroin there, or growing poppies there for manufacturing heroin and morphine that they're still sending off on the black market. The rest of the heroin production has been destroyed by the Taliban, and the poppy fields are burned every year. So they switched over to wheat and commercial crops. Well, I guess, poppies are a commercial crop, depending on the government you have and who's benefiting off it. But for them, drugs are one of the ultimate evils and sins. So, anyways, there's a lot of manpads already floating around. Plus, Ukraine is a arms hub from hell. And don't tell me the U.S. government officials and the Pentagon officials don't know how many weapons are flooding out, or they don't have a good ballpark figure of it. They do. And believe me, people are getting kickbacks off of this. They're flooding the world with weapons, especially small arms weapons, anti-aircraft missiles, shoulder-fired missiles, and so on. Plus, America, let's not forget, in 2021, America tried to do a color revolution with Islamic jihadists in Kazakhstan. You think all these guys weren't armed? Yes, of course they were. So what we're actually looking at is and the next level of terrorism when they start popping civilian airlines. Now, why I said the British? Because the British are leading the charge screaming the Russians did it. I mean, the limeys, SME, will just lie about anything anyways. But I mean, they get to, this gets even more ridiculous as they go along. So Russia was what? It was going to shoot down the plane that couldn't land in Grozny because of American and British terrorist drones that flew onto Kazakhstan. So somebody then, after that, ran over there real quick from the Russian side and fired it, or they fired a stealth, Star Trek stealth missile that can't be seen by anybody to try to take out this plane from Russian territory, which is about 300 kilometers. Well, this airport's about 300 kilometers from Russia's border. I mean, seriously. Oh, I'm sure there's quite a few people in England that'll lead it up and believe anything because, you know, they're the low information voter, or subject in this case, because they're not even citizens, they're subjects. They're the low information subject. They'll lead up whatever the hell the elites give them. But for anybody with half a brain cell that's still functional, hasn't committed suicide, harikari, think about what you're being told. Think about what crap you're being sold. I mean, this is beyond the pale of insanity. It's easier to believe Russia blew up Nord Stream than this. Never mind, you know, what was the point again of doing this? Yeah, exactly. That the West and their sponsored little rabid dog called Zelensky and his animals are committing terrorist actions all over the place, that's pretty damn obvious. And they, by the way, usually do that before they start another insane PR stunt attempt to invade Russia or Russian territory. So, and I all end very badly. Excuse me. The Ukrainian armed forces have this tradition. They rip into enemy territory and place themselves in a cauldron and then die in place. They've been doing it since 2014. They did it very well in Lugansk and Donetsk Oblast several times. Debaltseve is a prime example of that. They lost so many men in that. And they were trying to get out of after that cauldron closed. And they were just getting whacked in these two roads that were leading out in an open area. A lot of them were left rotting there for quite a while before they got buried. It's the same as Kursk. You know, the Americans and the British that planned out Kursk, the aim was to grab the Kursk nuclear power plant as a terrorist act, probably blow it up, or try to blow up the cooling system so it overheat, because that's who we're dealing with. We're dealing with terrorist regimes and their terrorist puppets. That failed. Now they're holding for dear life in a territory that's about a fourth of what it was before. Surrounded, it has one road in. And the reason they haven't been cleansed out of there is why cleanse them out? I mean, when the enemy is stupid enough to move in more and more and more and more and more troops into this little pocket where you're shooting at them at 360 degrees, because even the open one side that they can get their troops and supplies in is within range of all your artillery systems and aviation systems. So it's a turkey shoot, as they say, shooting fish in a barrel. So why hurry to close it out? It's not a critical front; it's contained. Well, the Ukrainians are getting ready to do this job again. Well, the Ukrainians via British and Americans. They've got this new marker. Now it's a white square tactical marker, so it's a new group. They've got. It was noticed even that some of their elite beat up units off the East Front started disappearing. So they're pushing them back up, and they're putting up a new grouping together. Plus whatever troops they've got from the Deep Reserve. Guys pulled off the street, or the ones that they farmed out to get trained in France and other places like that haven't deserted. Because quite a few of that battalion deserted. They learned from the French quite well how to surrender and run away. or better yet, just run away without having to surrender because you've never reached a battlefield. About a third of that brigade evaporated out as they were moving back to Ukraine. I don't blame these guys. They get thrown away as absolute meat for nothing for Zelensky's PR and Biden's PR. Oh, okay, it's not Biden's. It's Blinken's PR. Biden's too brain dead. The walking corpse can't remember his own name anymore. And that's been leaked on so many places that even the Democrats can't hide that anymore. The walking corpse they have as their leader. And the unelected Secretary of State that's now running the U.S. government, and a guy that has a very overinflated ego with a small understanding of the world, and is a fanatical hatred of Russia. Yeah, baby. But Sullivan's got his back. So where were we? Yeah. So it looks like they're going to try another charge. They're going to do this before Trump gets in office. And not just before Trump gets in office, but at least 5-7 days before, so they can try to open it up and make some kind of accomplishment. And the only two places they can go, realistically, at this point, is the Zaporozhye plant. And that's not going to happen. I'll tell you why. Zaporozhye electric power plant and Elektrodar, the town beside it, into Zaporozhskaya province in that area, or up into Bryansk. Bryansk is the lesser defended of the two, which is directly north of Sumy. Kursk, and what's going to happen is they're going to punch through and they're going to die in place. Look at the Eastern Front. What's going to happen right now? Pokrovsk or Krasnoarmeysk is the key logistical center. It's surrounded from the south and partially from the west now. Plus, the main railroad is under direct fire control from the Russian side. What happens? Now it can't be used as a logistics hub because already nothing's going south. A lot of what's coming from the west to east into Pokrovsk is being destroyed, so it only can still kind of feed the northeast, but it's got a lot less of what it can send up to the northeast. So the moment the next arm links up and cuts them off from the northeast of the front fully collapses because they're running out of gas, bullets, and food. That's up in Svatovo and that portion of Kharkovskaya Oblast. They're going to have to fall back toward Kharkov across the river. So that portion goes away. And that the whole northeastern front collapses instantly. The southeastern front, it can hold longer. It's got more logistics points coming across, but they are much more minor logistics points than what is feeding from Dnipropetrovsk. Problem for the Yukis is west of Pokrovsk is open steppe. There are very few villages. So almost about 200 kilometers from Pokrovsk over to the Dnieper and Dnipropetrovsk, the city of Dnipropetrovsk. Part of the city, the newer portions of the city are located on the eastern side of the Dnieper River. The rest is located on the main city is located on the western part of the Dnieper River. The Ukrainians did build 3 lines of defense across this open area, but they're idiotic waste of money. I think they were made more for PR for the West. Because A, they don't have the manpower to hold them. B, you can't hold them because there's very limited logistics. First of all, this winter, for us anyways, as opposed to the Western Europeans, it seems to be a relatively cold winter for them. It's a warm winter. The ground hasn't frozen. So most of the logistics, especially the wheel logistics that they need, because railroads are out, so the wheel logistics to hold these 3 lines all have to go across cemented or asphalted roads, hard surfaces. So that makes it very limited options. Out in the open, steppe, no forests, no forestry lines for the most part. No villages to jump from one to one to hide that you can use as some kind of strong points. And the ones that do exist, they can go, they're easily avoidable and just go around them. And then what are you going to do when they're sitting there? They can still sit in their village, and now they're deep in the rear, and they're not getting fed or supplied, and it's just a matter of time before they either surrender or try to break out and get wiped out. by second echelon, third echelon forces. So what do? You don't do. You run east, from the east to the west, across the Dnieper. So it's easier, of course, to hold the perimeter on the other bank of Dnieper, which, by the way, is a higher bank than the eastern bank, the western bank. Just how it runs, the river runs. So those troops, they're starting to pull those battered battalions and brigades off into this new grouping. And they have to do something big for PR. So more than likely, they're going to try to rip into Russian territory again. They could go, of course, into Zaporozhye power plant area. But here's the problem. Right across the Zaporozhye power plant was this gigantic water reserve. The Ukrainians blew up the dam, drained the dam down. So the Dnieper River's there right in the middle of this former water reserve. Of course, the Zaporozhye power plant sits on high ground compared to all this. But why they won't cross is because now you've got a giant swamp marshland. No, marshland, right? So it's mud. Plus, since the winter isn't that cold, it hasn't frozen solid. You're not going to get heavy, especially American style or Western style heavy equipment across that. It's just going to sink into that mud. Plus, it's 10 kilometers open territory that any defenders on the higher ground in Zaporozhye power plant and Energodar can see straight across. So anything coming across that open area trying to charge in 10 kilometers of open land, even if it's frozen solid, artillery, direct fire anti-tank weaponry, drones, they're never going to reach small arms range before they're all pig and dog food, because the pigs are getting the feral pigs are getting real fat, and so are the feral dogs from all this fighting, because the Ukrainians tend to leave their dead lying around and rotting, and they do that partially because then they don't have to admit that they're dead and their losses, and two, they can the commanders can continue collecting salaries from these guys from their own little benefits. Because everything at above captain level, and even most of the captains in the Ukrainian army, they don't come out their front end anymore. You still have some lieutenants and some captains, but that's about it. The colonels and the majors and lieutenant colonels and colonels, they don't go out their front. Are you kidding me? That's dangerous. They sit in the deep rear in warmth. So that's the whole area right there. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. The idiot moment is upon us, and I would probably say, knowing how the West operates, and they love holidays to spoil the holidays, they will more than likely try to do something around New Year's. Or the days right after New Year's. Because they've got, 25 days before Trump comes into power. And the CIA, Burns has been in Ukraine telling all these guys, we're here forever, screw Trump, screw Kelsey Gabbard, we're going to do whatever, we're here, we are a power on ourselves, we'll got your back. So, there you go. They're getting pushed to do this big attack. It'll wind up, that's why I think they'll go north, because they got more cover in that direction, and it's an easier border, and you don't have 150,000 troops stationed just behind the front lines in that area, waiting to do something. And something would probably mean going north up the river to grab Zaporozhye city, which is the capital of Zaporozhye province. And then into Poltava. So there you go. That looks like what it's going to be. I may be wrong. Won't be the first time, but that's my professional opinion of who's going to go where. And it more than likely will happen within the next week, 2 weeks maximum. We'll live and see. God bless. Merry Christmas to those who already celebrated Christmas. Merry Christmas to my Orthodox brothers and sisters who will be celebrating Christmas in 2 weeks. Merry upcoming Christmas. And a Happy New Year. I will probably make another video before that happens. And I've got a very important video coming out. I can't fully label it because the algorithm will probably take it offline. It's with City Councillor Western Australia, good friend of mine, Adrian McCree. You need to listen to this. because what's happening in Australia is happening in all Western countries and in a good chunk of Latin America and Africa and Southeast Asia. And you got it. It's got to do with certain products of a certain company called Pfizer and a certain company called Merck and a few other companies like that. And it's scary. I mean, it is scary. And Adrian is very, very connected in this, what's going on and fighting it. And the things he's got to say, you have got to listen. And that will probably, I will try to get that video out tonight. So, have fun, stay safe, fight the good fight. And the good fight being against, and don't forget, stop. Satanic Temple on Potomac, stop. Fight the good fight. All right. And by the way, click the like button. If you want to sponsor me, Patreon is still available. I'm would be very grateful. I still have an old American account, interestingly enough. Fight the good fight. Like I said, click like, resend to friends. It is what it is. And don't forget, everything in the end is still in God's hands. Cheers.